So I grew up from the PDP space. People remember PDP 11. Moving on to Minix. Anybody know what Minix is? Okay, great. And of course, Linux. Spent a whole bunch of years on Kerberos, the granddaddy of all open source software. 1985 was the first paper. It's built into everything. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. So I want to talk about data, AI, blockchain, this idea of identity. My talk is really about identity. There's a lot of debate now about identity. It's an old topic, 20 years old. It was a big deal in the IETF back in the 90s. That's the home of X509 certificates for those who are interested. But I think people today are confusing a number of things about identity. People talk about public keys as being identities. They're not, it's just identifiers. My credit card number is just an identifier. But really, what we want to focus on with our work at MIT is what is it that is important in identity? What is it important that we find in relationships? As we go back to this notion of community, and this is all the work that Sandy does. And if you want to read something interesting, social physics, I have 3 copies of that, all marked all over the place. A very important book. The idea is that we live in a community. I live in a town. There's a bunch of people that I know in the town. They know me. The town hall knows me. The local Bank of America knows me. So in fact, if I had to go to the bank, I'd prefer to go to my bank there, my branch, than the branch in Cambridge, right? Because of the social connections. And so how do you capture these connections, right? And there's a big area of study on social interactions, social networks that's happening today. And I think the whole identity space, people looking at identity are not really, they're kind of barking up the wrong tree. There's all this body of work that really needs to be brought to light, and people need to understand relationships as captured in networks. Now, right now, what the industry is really looking for is not so much identity, it's about trustworthy assertions about me. So if I go and apply for a mortgage, really the mortgage company is interested in assertions about me. Nowadays all we have is the credit score, and with Equifax being Equifax, and you guys know about the news, we might need a different angle on how to get high provenance assertions. So, and these are some words I'm just going to talk about. What we want is to capture the community interaction network. If I have a relationship with my neighbor in the back, Bob, it's because he's my neighbor. He cuts my lawn. I fix his Wi-Fi because it keeps breaking down. I install whatever updates he needs on his Windows machine. So we have a good relationship because of frequent interactions with positive outcomes. I benefit. He cuts my lawn. I hate cutting lawns. He benefits because he's a total, non-tech person. Now, he might know another guy in the other side of town called Joe, and Joe might be a garage, and that's because these guys went to school together, local school, right? And so if I want to deal with Joe, I'm more open to dealing with somebody that I've never dealt with before or dealt infrequently because of a common, strong network. I will have hesitancy in treating Joe badly because of this common connection, and vice versa. Joe says, "Well, your neighbor Bob, Bob, I'll give you a good deal on your next, oil change," right? We live through this. We know this, okay? There's nothing strange here. So how do we capture this in the digital space? And so there's this notion of density of interconnections. How dense is my relationship in terms of positive frequent interactions with Bob versus Joe? And what if I have disputes with the other neighbor? What is the density of the interactions that have negative, unpleasant outcomes? We know about this, right? We live through this. And we tend to speak to Bob more than to speak to the other guy next door house. I don't even remember his name because we have a dispute. So the key to the foundation to trust, people trust, social trust, is frequent interactions with positive outcomes. And on the other side, if we have negative behavior in our network, it needs to be reflected. It needs to have impact on me so that it becomes a deterrent. Because if I misbehave and I'm not penalized, there's really no value to the network. Is it good? Okay. What they're trying to build is a thing called a trust network. And what it is it's the network of all these local community networks, right? So I will have a social network. I will have an online, network. It could be Facebook, could be something else. I have a financial network. I use several credit cards. I know the guys downtown in the local bank. And I might have a social, play golf. I'm not a golfer, but I might have a golf network. The guys who like to play golf. I might have a cycling network. 5 guys who ride every Saturday, and that's all they do. That's the only common thing they do is meet, and ride for the 50 miles every Saturday. So in dealing with this disparate, physically separated communities and online communities, we need a thing called a personal infomediary. So you guys know what infomedia. Imagine a computer or a process that stands for you. It's your proxy that deals with all these other networks outside. It's a proxy that deals with Facebook. And there's a number of requirements. For example, if you're on a social network, really all the other participants shouldn't know that they're talking to a proxy. I like to call it the reverse Alexa. You guys know who I'm talking about? What if you could have an Alexa box that actually you own, you control, that pretends to be you and knows how to interact with the world. It has enough AI, has enough data to make sense. So that the other says, well, and the Alexa could even post tweets for me, right? That'd be great. And so this thing needs to have a fiduciary relationship, a fiduciary obligation to me. In the cases when this reverse Alexa service is a hosted service offered by somebody else, which is probably going to be the outcome right now, I need to have a clear relationship in terms of legal obligations, fiduciary obligations between the service provider and myself. Finally, this is the first line is sort of the lay language. Going into the future, can I have my own AI on my own reverse Alexa, my infomediary, working on my encrypted data, right? On different blockchains. So I'm not saying you put data on blockchains. I'm saying the blockchains could be the lookup mechanism for different endpoints of my data store. It could have certain limited smart contracts that invoke different algorithms that belong to me and run on specific data sets that I own. Can that function and provide me with control over my life? And of course, is there a way to bring revenue for the individual? How can I monetize my personal data? All along this, could this thing be self-protecting? Right? This idea of, can you have a blockchain that has enough AI to understand it's under attack, understand that certain nodes are experiencing DDoS attacks and so on. And finally, one topic that barely ever gets a mention, except in the research academic community, is a thing called digital death. And that is, it's a real research field. I didn't make this up, just Google it. If I die, who has legal rights? I've got a lawyer here. Who has legal rights over data on my social media platform? Right? Who has rights over my AT&T telecom records? A good question. So could this notion of an infomediary be a solution to this digital death problem in the sense that I can actually write a will that says, well, my children or my brother is going to be the future custodian of my infomediary. Nothing changes on the machinery itself, but the rights to access and the legal ownership becomes my brother's ownership. Okay. Hope that was 5 minutes.